And the band is back together. Welcome to another edition of the world's favorite youth baseball podcast, Clearing the Bases, featuring Coach Jimmy Filangieri. I'm David Friedman. I want to thank you for coming along this ride with us. How are we doing today, Coach?
Doing good today, Dave. I like that little, that way you kind of mixed it up a little bit there in the beginning.
Yeah. I feel like it's been too long. I feel like it's been a while, and it's been too long since we've gotten together for one of these.
Well, actually, to tell you the truth, this show we recorded quite a while ago, and, I've been chomping at the bit to get it out. But listen, this time of year for both of us is very, very difficult because we both got baseball going on and, personal things, and it just makes it hard.
Yep. I'm fully in the swing of things. No pun intended for the JV teams. So no rest for the next, basically month and a half, and then we'll settle back down again. But so the frequency with which these get put out is going to slow down a little, as it has we've hit our 2-year anniversary now, so it certainly has for both years. Kind of unavoidable based on, like you said, our schedules. Just besides normal life craziness, you throw a school schedule in there, and it gets a little out of hand sometimes. Right. Yeah, and I mean, it's not like we have to just worry about one person's schedule. It's my schedule, it's your schedule, it's the guest schedule, and it makes it a little difficult. Yeah, it certainly does. So we are had my first scrimmage as a player, so the first live action I've seen in 22 years. So got a lot of sun today, and did some good running around, some good, some not so good things that it did, but I know what I need to work on. Well, listen, I got to give you all the credit in the world for getting out there and actually giving it a shot. I mean, God bless you, because I don't think I could do it anymore. It is kind of, I'm surprised that, so the league I'm in, it's a 45 and over league. I'm 52. I'll be 53 this summer, and I am one of the younger guys on our team. So, as much as I appreciate you saying that, and I'm kind of proud of myself for getting back in the game after not having played for so long. But then I also look at the other guys around me. I'm like, well, geez, if I have no excuse whatsoever if these other guys can do it. So right, you're the kid. It's kind of shocking, but it's all good. How's things going with the JV season? Going good. We're underway. We've played our first 2 league games, and I like the way, we had one little hiccup. We played a game where it was probably about 32 degrees below zero out, so it was very, very difficult to play. So the boys really didn't play well. But, again, it was very, very cold, so I'll give them that. But 2 games in the books and 1-1, and I think that should be a good season. Good. How about you? Yeah. We've gotten 3 games down. We're 2-1. 2-1. The one game we lost, we actually were up in the 6th inning. It was wound up being a 2-run game. So, and they were a more talented team. They're one of the perennial powerhouses in our area. And so the fact that our boys were able to hang with them throughout, even take the lead later in the game, we're very, very proud of them. As always, there's things to be worked on, and we've worked on things since then. That actually was our opener. So, very, very encouraged by this team. We are a little bit older than what we've had in the past, in that we only have a few kids that we brought up from modified instead of half the team like it was last year. So we're very encouraged that we think we're going to have a real good, positive season. That's great. That's great to hear. I mean, especially the fact that, you didn't have to rely on pulling up that many from the modified. That's a big change for you, right? I mean, the last 2 years, there's been quite a few 7th and 8th graders. Yeah, I mean, last year we had 1 10th grade. Right. For our JV team. And then about half were from the junior high. So, so it's great we got almost all those kids back. A couple of the kids that we had from the 8th graders last year actually got pulled up to varsity because they were ready. My understanding is, and they've played a few more games than we have already, and our guys are contributing. So that's a great feeling. And it does, hopefully it's a sign of things to come in terms of our area baseball kind of making a comeback, and that we don't, we've got enough kids with talent that we don't have to pull kids up from the other program and leave them weak, which obviously that's a waterfall effect that we see.
Sure. Actually, to tell you the truth, this year with my team, we pulled the largest amount of freshmen that I've ever pulled up to JV, and it was 5. And again, I think it's a sign that things are good. When we start getting that many freshmen that are that talented coming in, it's a good sign.
Sure. So, well, that's all good. That is good news. We are looking forward, just in the beginning of the season here. We got a very, very busy month and a half. So do want to just throw out there that the frequency of the shows, as any of our regular listeners knows, has certainly dipped down a little here. We're going to do what we can with the two of us coaching at 2 different schools. So we have 2 completely different schedules, along with the normal regular family, home life craziness and work. We do have those job things that we got to worry about. So it's been a little tough. It will continue to be tough, as it has for the last 2 years. And we'll make the best of it. And hopefully we'll still continue to put out good quality listening for our people.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I know that we have a few guests coming up that people will be interested in hearing. It's just a matter of, getting them done and getting them out there. So we'll do our best to get them out to everyone. But even with this show, now this is somebody that I wanted to have on this show for a very, very long time. And, we recorded the show, and I actually feel a little guilty that we didn't get it out right away. But it just, again, like you said, this time of year is very difficult. Between tryouts, getting the team going and stuff, our time is very, very limited. So I apologize, but this is a great episode, and I think people will really enjoy it.
Yeah, I certainly think so. I think here's a man who needs no introduction, Mr. Alan Jaeger. He's somebody that's obviously very well known in our circles, and I think he's got a ton of good information to get out to our people. And without further ado, I think we should jump right into it.
Okay, so tonight we have on the show Alan Jaeger. Now, if you haven't heard that name, then I don't know, you must have been like underneath a rock somewhere. But Alan, I want to welcome you to the show.
Jimmy, thank you. You're funny. Thank you for having me, and it's a treat to be on with you. Really, I'm looking forward to our chat.
Yeah, so am I. I mean, I know that there's a lot of good stuff that we can get into, and we can help some people along the way, and that's what we're trying to do.
Awesome.
So Alan has so many sides to him. There's so many things. But what we're going to do is we're going to kind of break it up a little bit into arm care and throwing routines and stuff like that to help our young pitchers. And then what we'll do is we're going to get into the mental side.
Cool.
So let's start off. First thing is, I know that, and I kind of got to get this out of the way. Okay, Jaeger bands, everybody knows Jaeger bands. So how did that come about?
Thank you. And by the way, if I didn't say it, thank you for the kind introduction as well. Well, the story goes like this. I met Perry Husband, who a lot of people know. Perry is an incredible teacher, hitting guy, and much more than that. He originated, he founded Effective Velocity EV. And so I fortunately I think this was around the time I was doing my yoga teacher training. I always loved stretching, and so elasticity, things like that, always resonated with me. And Perry had these, which are, you could call them J-bands now, but they basically were essentially the same things. And he went through a period when he was with the Minnesota Twins where he had an arm issue, and he was a position player, ironically. And he basically was turned on to these arm care exercises. And Perry, being as smart as he is, the light went on. He's like, man, I cannot believe, he might have thought his career was over back in the late 80s, around the time. There wasn't any kind of information there is now. There wasn't an internet. And so, not that it's not always scary, but for him, it probably really, really scary. Sure. And the fact that he went from an arm issue to feeling super healthy and strong, was just a revelation for him. So even though he's a hitting guy, he was all in on arm care and injury prevention. And so that's sort of the backstory when we met. And he started telling me about these bands. And so we started integrating. I actually just started integrating them with my private lessons. And again, I didn't know much about it, but the concept of sort of prehab versus rehab made a lot of sense to me because I was always a stretcher and I was always a prep guy. I loved preparing. So I started just buying him onesies and twosies here and there from him. And then eventually, I had a partner at that time back in the 90s, Lou Burt, and we kind of started doing camps. So I ordered more. And then my current partner, Jim Batcher, 2000, joined full time. And we just got to a point where Perry made them by hand for us. And he said he didn't want to make them anymore by hand. So they would take too much time because we were ordering more and more, which was nice. And so we basically bought Perry out and renamed them. They were actually called Weisolators, like a Y. Mm-hmm. And Perry also had bands for like overstriding for hitters. So he was just into the bands. And so that's just how it started. And we, look, like, you're talking off air about the podcast, how things happen organically. I mean, honestly, I was buying them, like I said, one at a time for my own players. And I don't even know if I charged them anything more than they cost me. I just wanted them to have that tool. They were already paying me for the lesson per se.
Right.
And I honestly, it's just one of those things. It's surreal. I just feel like they have a life of their own. And I think the main thing, of course, besides the fact that they're viscerally that effective on, like, we feel it, that effect is so deep. But I think the other thing that helped a ton is that we had a program. We weren't just like a tool that was out there in the market. Not that it wouldn't have worked, but that way. But I think the fact that we had a long test program, we had a DVD, we had videos out there, I think helped a ton because it was sort of like not just seen maybe as an apparatus. It had sort of this baseball sports training vibe behind it. And so it's really, that's the kind of the extent of the story.
It's amazing because everybody knows Jaeger bands. Everybody uses them. All my players use them. And I see them being used everywhere. So congratulations on that. That was fantastic.
I feel like we took something that was already out there in the world. Granted, this is before the internet, and maybe they were more just for the rehab PT offices. It was really more like in clinics that you'd find them. But I just feel what's cool is that I feel like the J bands and this whole resistance training, I feel like it's become more part of the culture that you don't do arm care exercises just because you're rehabbing. I think that's the main piece that we push so hard and Grant. There are so many people out there that around the same time, the Ron Wolfers of the world, Eric Cressy, that there was a big community of people that started really saying, no, be proactive with arm care. But I still feel like that's like the main thing about the J bands that I love so much is that people see them now as arm preparation. And again, I'm going to steal a word that I got from a PT back in the day named Tina Schwager, who was in our first video. And she was the one that gave me that term that I just love so much, which this is back in 1999, 2000. She used the word prehab, but I'd never heard that word before. And I just think it's such a great term. So thank you. But it's just cool because it's really, like I said, it's a life of its own. And I think the J bands have gotten out there because they just really, they just work. They make such a difference. And like I said, I have a yoga background, and I just know the difference of how I feel when I get in a good stretch. And I play tennis 2-3 times a week. And I'm not saying this to say it. The need for me to do my J bands before I play tennis or go out and throw, the effect of my arm, my body, and my mind of doing it versus not doing it is profound.
Yeah, I'm sure
it's that big of a difference. So anyway.
Yeah, I'm sure. And I'm going to move into another topic, but the one thing that I love about those bands is the fact that any player anywhere can use them to continually work on strengthening their arm or conditioning their arm. without having to go to a gym or something. They could do it at home. They could do it before the game. They could do it after. It's just a great tool, and it's very versatile. So great. I mean, it's fantastic.
Thank you. And you can use it even now. We have a lower, not to promote it, but we have like a lower body core workout where you can actually, like you said, you can't get to the gym. There's endless things you can do with those bands, endless. And but the bottom line is, like you said, it's just nice to know that you can be out of field and you can get a ton of work done without having to be at a gym.
Right. So one of the things that you had just mentioned, you kind of touched on it a little bit, and this is I want to get into because I think it's really important, is your long toss program. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Well, for me, long toss is as innate and intuitive as it gets. It's something that you do, your body wants to do, your mind wants to do. I find that, to me, the things in life that resonate most with me are things that just feel right. You don't have to think about it. It's, again, I'll use the word visceral. It's a very strong effect. And to me, long toss is amazing because it doesn't have to be a program, or you just go out there and you start throwing, and our bodies want to throw with some height and some arc because it's our body's natural way intuitively to stretch out and protect ourselves before we do anything with great exertion, right, or high intensity. So if you think about long toss and throwing the ball further and further, of course, built up progressively over time, but as you do go through those phases, it's this idea that the ball is going higher and higher, which means your shoulder is opening up at these different, increments, these different angles. So you're getting this great term, range of motion, in the arm. It just feels right. It's sort of like the body breathing. It just feels like your arm is breathing, your arm is stretching out, your arm is freeing up. We use the word open up. Your arm is opening up, and you're doing all these great things, and you're developing this feel as a result of the proprioception and the different angles. And then all the different places you touch going uphill, what's beautiful is you get to touch all those places coming downhill on the pull down phase. And not to mention, your body is organizing itself, right, through this process of going uphill. So it's not just your release point that's getting these benefits of proprioception and feel, and of course the range of motion in the arm, but your body is going through that same transformation too. And so for me, there's just nothing else I can think of as far as getting the arm to optimize everything from health, endurance, range of motion, accuracy, arm strength, durability, recovery. I mean, you just name them all. And to me, this is what comes out of long toss. And I just feel like it's just a life changer. There's just no other way of saying it. And I know from doing it from as long as I can remember, it just feels great. It feels right, and it feels intuitive.
The one thing that amazes me about the long toss is 800 years ago when I was a kid, we did that. We just did that. I mean, we would get two people, get as far apart as you can, or, just as long as we could reach each other, and air it out. And we would do that for hours upon hours. Who knew back then that we were doing something that we should have been doing? And it's free and easy. It's, just let your arm go. Just let it do its own work.
Yeah, and this is something that I want to touch on, Jimmy. That's very important because there was a lot of years where there was some resistance with long toss because of the arc and the changing of the release point. And we've always tried to explain that that's the strength, the idea of this arc going uphill, the range of motion, the stretching the arm out, the stretching the body out, the proprioception. And then also the body's adapting to these angles up, then it gets to adapt to these angles down. So now you're creating leverage and downhill plane and your explosiveness, things that are hard to touch by only staying on a line in a way. And so what's cool is that I've always said to people, like, we're not trying to say long toss is like this program. Long toss is nature. Long toss is innate. And so I never understood, I don't want to make it sound like I don't respect people's opinions, but whenever there was pushback on long toss, what I had a hard time understanding knowing how it made me feel, and then all the people we've trained over all the years, and the the effect in their faces, and all the coaches that have implemented it, and talking to someone like you about it, and how much you light up. And to me, it's so innate, it's so natural. And so I think we've always been an advocate for long toss just as more of something that's innate, not because you should do it because a program said you should do it. And it's like you just sort of said, in a way, if you listen to your body or listen to your arm and you don't know of a program, it's what you're going to do. And that to me is why I feel like long toss has such a overwhelming effect on people when they do it. It's because it's, again, I've used this word a lot. It's innate, it's intuitive, it feels right. And it's not because you should do it a certain way. It's because of what the body wants to do. And I think that's why it's so beautiful.
Well, it makes perfect sense. Like you said, it's innate. Your body wants to do it, and only good can come from that. That's the way I see it anyway. So we talked a little bit about, long tossing and on our way out. Let's talk a little bit about the pull downs on the way in, because I think that part of it is something that I don't think a lot of people understand, how those pull downs are supposed to be done and how they actually help.
Yeah, it's a great question, Jimmy, because it is tricky. I actually remember doing a video on Twitter where I just really talked about long toss and really or the pull downs, and why players may not be optimizing their velocity on the mound because of this one piece that eventually will come out in this explanation. But essentially, first of all, only pull down once the arm has been fully stretched out, which means you need to have been in full stretch out mode in your long toss progression. So if you're a 200-foot athlete as your max distance, or 300 feet, we don't really want you pulling down, because pulling down really means basically full intent. Not that you can't come in with pulling down with less intent if you're not quite in shape yet, but if you go to the art form of a real pull down, it's really about taking your max distance throw that day and maintain that intent on the way back in. So as a definition, again, assuming someone's in shape to do it, and not every day is a pull down day, as we know, position players can get away with it a little bit more because of course, they don't have to deal with recovery and breaking balls and throwing off the mound, and the day before a mound day, the day after a mound day. And so if it is a pull down day, to make this definition simple, if 300 feet for an older kid is X, or for a younger kid, let's say 180 is X, that's their max distance that day, then you just maintain X on the way back in, and we come in about 10 feet of throw. And the reason why it's hard to maintain X is the closer you get, the more you have to organize your body and be relaxed enough to let the release point get out in front to compress all that distance as the angle gets lower and lower. So what tends to happen, until someone really gets this and has been coached well or figures this out intuitively, is that as a player gets closer, they're going to start to decelerate, even if it's a little bit, because A, they don't want to play chase, B, it doesn't look good if they miss their partner. C, we want to play catch, right? That's a big part of the game. But a true pull down is, as you get closer to your partner, you're going to have to start aiming a lot lower and a lot lower and a lot lower. We actually have a saying, which is, on the way back in, we'd rather you miss 100 feet in front of your partner than 1 inch over their head. Because we want to make sure that if nothing else, you're missing low, you're getting that downhill plane, and your mind is freed up to know that there's no gray area. You're not going to guide the ball on any level. You're throwing at X. Maintain X, 180 or 300 feet, whatever example you want to use. Maintain X all the way in. Now, when you take a 300-foot throw, we have guys that are out to 350, 360, right? Some of the professional guys.
Right.
And we don't even let them get into 60 feet. It's too dangerous. But let's say they get into 70 feet with a catcher geared up with a face mask. The whole idea is, what does that look like to compress 360 feet or X into 70 feet with a geared up catcher with a face mask, to where the ball ends up shin high or lower. Mm-hmm. And not 1 inch of that 360 feet is gone, is missing. Now that to me is like like the mother load. That's like feeling like you have hit the perfect ball on the screws to right center, like everything lined up well. And it is an art form, but boy, when you feel that feeling of maintaining your X as you get closer to your partner and missing knee high or lower, what your body has to do efficiently and effectively to organize itself to pull it off, to me, it's like making the best throw. It's sort of like, I have a saying with hitters that, to me, the best mental, physical approach to hitting, like to me, where I know someone's like in the best state of mind and body to be a hitter, is if you're right-handed and you can hit a ball on the right field foul line and keep it straight with authority straight down that right field line. Because you have to do so many things right. You have to relax, you have to be quiet, but you have to be explosive at the right time. You can't hook it, you can't be late, you have to be on time. And to me, that whole sensation of being on time and being relaxed to pull this off is very metaphoric of this idea of a true pull down. So back to your question, is just for the listeners to be hyper aware of this, is you can ask yourself, or coaches, you can ask the player a very simple question. Let's say 180 was their max. They're back at 90 feet. You can tell the player, it looks pretty good, but they're decelerating a little bit. When the player makes the throw, ask him this question. If I would have taken that last throw you made and then moved the angle back to your furthest angle today at 180 feet, how far will the ball go? And it's amazing how in tune these kids are. Like they may not say like 20 feet. They might say 112. But the point is, they know the ball would die. It wouldn't quite get there, right, or it wouldn't get there by a lot. I've used percentages. The player would say, it was probably 85% of my max throw. And then you're like, okay, we're not moving in yet. Let's do this again. And they might launch their partner a little bit because they're new to them. But eventually you get them competitive and you're like, okay, you got the 100% of the distance. You got the X this time, but you still went over the partner's head. And I need you to maintain X. We got to figure out how do we get the ball, belt line or lower. And what happens is it becomes more mental. They start figuring out, I got to aim closer and closer, and I got to really get downhill. I got to figure out a way to get downhill. And I'm telling you, this is an incredibly good teaching tool for pitchers, not only for getting downhill off the mound, but it starts to influence their breaking balls as well. So, the changeup and, if they're old enough to throw a curveball, what have you. So I know that was a long answer, but the pull down is a very nuanced topic. And, hopefully that gives you some good ideas more about it.
Yeah, it does. And you hit on all of the points, because the main thing that you said that I know that I have problems with is that deceleration. Because they're younger kids, they're 14, 15, 16 years old, and it seems to me that that's a natural reaction when you start getting that close, is that you don't want to throw that hard, so you do decelerate, and it's just something that I need to keep working with my players on to make sure that they don't. So one thing that I did want to ask, so if you get out to your maximum long toss, let's say it's 200 feet, when, again, you're all stretched out now and your arm is loose, so now from 200 feet, now you're pulling down from that point back in, is that correct?
Yeah, and in all fairness, I know I've backed off this a bit the last few years talking about it. I'm okay from 200 to 140 if the kids are more in that 80, 85%. For me, it's really more, even if you're coming in from 300 feet, it's really more, well, let's say from 200 feet, it's really more of that 120 and in, and I'd say from a 300-foot plus athlete, it might be more from 180, 150 and in. The reason why is because you're on flat ground, it takes a lot of work. I'd almost rather the player, and you're most tested anyway, the second half of the way in. So now, if you're an outfielder, you might love that 240-foot throw coming in from 300 feet, and that's a more, practical throw that you're going to make in a game. So that's like functional training at that point. You get into 120 feet or so, or 110 feet as a catcher. You get into that throw where you're kind of deep in the hole as a shortstop. So there are increments that you might stop at and just make some extra throws there and really work on that on the pull downs there. But I would say generally, pull downs technically do start when you've made your last throw, and then you know you're completely aired out, and then you move in, let's say 10 feet, you're at 190, and you're already saying, okay, here comes 200 feet, and maybe you only have to aim, 1 inch lower on the sky, but that's the whole idea, yeah.
Okay. All right, yeah, I just wanted to make sure that everybody was clear on that, because I know I've been guilty of it at times where I felt like their arms weren't strong enough, so whatever their max long toss was, I would have them come back in a little bit and say, okay, now guys, now start your pull downs and do it that way. But again, it's, I guess maybe if I had older guys that had stronger arms, I might see it differently.
Yeah, and also you have to remember this too. It's all part of this adaptability. If you're, again, the younger kids, maybe from 200 feet in, it's not maybe as big of a deal, right? It's not as magnified, but I feel like once you start getting older and you start getting out to these bigger distances, the ability to be at 300 feet and 280 and 260 and 240 and 220 and start to gauge what does it really feel like to pull down correctly, it all is part of that field, right? It's that adaptability. And to me, it's part of what builds accuracy moving forward, because you're having these closer incremental movements. You're not having these big jumps of like 300 feet, then I'm going to walk into 150. You're still going to get a lot out of pulling down at 150 and in, but there's something to be said about the small incremental adjustments that you go from 300 to 280 to 260. And I feel like that's a piece of the feel that, just generally speaking, even if you're a position player, it becomes super valuable, because position players are making throws all over the field at different increments. So maybe for pitchers, I'm just a feel adaptability person. I like this idea of these incremental adjustments on the fly as you move back in. And so, no, it's not the end of the world if you walk in from 300 feet to 150 or whatever, but you might at least make, even if you came in 20 feet to throw, right? Just sort of have a connective sort of feel coming in.
Sure. Okay. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. Like I said, I mean, it's something, and that's why I brought it up, because I can speak for myself. If I'm doing something that I believe that I'm not sure if it's right, I want to know if it's right, and then whatever the right thing is, that's what I want to do. So
I appreciate that.
Okay, so
it's good for us all to hear that. I'm all about open-mindedness and just learning and getting things done the best way. It doesn't necessarily have to be our way or their way. It's just what's the best way, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's, I can speak for myself. I feel like I'm always starving for more information. I can't learn enough, so I want to, and how else do you learn if you don't ask questions, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So one of the things that I heard you talk about was variance in the way players throw. And when I heard you talk about it, I thought to myself, I've heard a million times pitching instructors, we have to repeat our delivery, everything's got to be the same. Is that what you meant by having variance in your throwing, that it doesn't necessarily have to be the same?
Yes, and for more information on this, everybody should go to Randy Sullivan, the Florida Armory, and study Randy. Randy talks a lot about these micro adjustments, and I can't do it justice in the quote unquote scientific or anatomical terms, but yes, this idea of these micro adjustments and these feels as opposed to this constant repeatability. There's actually, I can't remember the name of it, but I think there's a term for when you keep repeating like too much, it's like too linear. There's no color to it, right? There's no feel around it. And it's like like repetitive muscle memory syndrome or something, I'm making it up, but, and Randy, God, I'm trying to think of how he terms it. But he's just, in fact, if you go to YouTube, Randy was on a Zoom room that we had, and he talks about it there, I believe. But yeah, it's just this idea of it's the feel factor, right? You're just making these micro adjustments in space, and you're adapting. Your mind and body it's beautiful. It's figuring out things, it's adjusting, it's adapting. And so now you're touching these worlds that I guess when you just keep repeating things over and over again, the color is not there. It's too black and white. And I look at it also like in the terms of like left brain being very linear and right brain being the creative side, right? It's like you want to tap into your creative feel, right? That's the adaptations, right?
Yep.
That's the proprioception versus the repeating over and over and over and over. I know in theory it kind of sounds right. It kind of makes sense, right? Like throwing a dart over and over again. But there's something to it that I can't do justice. But again, that's where like you just said, as far as I have no problem saying, hey, go someone that really understands this on a really deep anatomical scientific level. And Randy is just so good with this stuff. So yeah, variability, variance. Randy and I've had rabbit holes with Randy about that exact topic, about variability. And he's been a huge influence on me and Jaeger Sports with regard to why I've always felt that changing of the release point was so imperative for feel and accuracy. And I didn't really necessarily have a great technical answer when people would say, well, don't you want to repeat? Don't you want your release point and all that? And I couldn't really give them a very good anatomical answer. I can only give them a good instinctive, intuitive answer, and also from a lot of experience doing it myself and the athletes we train. But Randy will put it in scientific terms, and it's very powerful.
Well, if I could break that down a little bit, and again, this is from my simplistic view of things, is I know if I'm working, and I'll use a hitter, I don't want to create robots. I don't want them to be very mechanical. I want them to be free-flowing. I want them to be athletic. And I feel that with a pitcher, if we pound home that thought that we have to repeat that delivery, it has to be right here, it has to be here, well, now the kid that's all he's thinking about, and that's what he's fighting to do, as opposed to just letting it happen. I mean, does that make sense?
Totally. And to add another piece, it's like, back to what you're saying about athleticism, it's a great point too, because think of it this way. We don't just run on flat ground. We run uphill, we run downhill, right? That's the color I was talking about, the diversity. And Randy I can't do it justice, but Randy gets into really why this is vital for our system, for our adaptability and the proprioception in the field, and why this changing, I'm trying to think of the term he uses, not confusion or mixed. It's like, it's not the confusion. There's a term he uses that basically is basically what you're saying. It's to pull the athlete out, pull the feel out, right? Pull the adaptability out, and not stay in this robotic, linear motion that's over and over, because it sounds good in theory, but it just comes back to this whole idea of feel. We're really talking about athletes or artists. Artists, we want to have feel. We don't want someone painting on a canvas and just, unless they're doing dot to dot, a linear program, but we want them singers, guitarists. Guitarists aren't thinking about AEG.
Right.
They don't have time to think about AEG. They're in space. There's another word I should have brought up a long time ago. One of my new favorite words, space. Being in space. So this release point up and down, the body moving all these different parts. Now you're moving in space. There's freedom. There's intuition in space. There's athleticism in space. We don't want to suck that out and get someone into this ABC and very repeating that linear motion.
Right.
And again, I know on some level it sort of makes some sense. Like if you do A, B, and C like a robot, you're going to repeat and throw. Butch Thompson has such a great line from the ABCA about 7 or 8 years ago, and he said, "I can't sign my own name twice in a row the same way." So why am I trying to get someone to quote unquote repeat through technical means when we can really tap into their athleticism, their feel, their intuition, their instincts. Like, let that take over, right?
And that's such a great analogy. That's perfect.
Well, Butch is,
yeah.
Butch has loads of nuggets.
Yeah, I'm sure. Okay, so the next thing I want to get in, and I'm kind of skipping through my notes here. This is something that I think it's very important before we move on, is your 5-day model, 7-day model. Okay, so what does that look like so people can understand what their players should be doing right after they pitch?
Yeah, I'll probably just stick more with the 7 because the 5-day is going to be more on the pro side, and to some degree the 6-day. And I think since the audience, generally speaking, is going to be more, youth and, through, let's say, high school per se, even through college. I mean, really the 7-day is the model everywhere unless you're in pro ball. So I think the main takeaways on the 7-day are as follows, Jimmy. 1, your real optimal long toss days are on your mound days. And I think that's something that a lot of people, I shouldn't say a lot of people, but that might surprise people. If you're going to go into full intent mode, whether it's a bullpen or a game situation, here's a simple saying. You want full intent, arm needs to be fully stretched out. So if you're a 300-foot player or a 180-foot player, whatever your max distance normally is, well, you want to open up all the gears, right?
Yep.
You don't want to throw with high intent if the arms open up to 50% of what you've been training at. So that's why now we may not stay out at our full distance for more than a couple of throws. That's where we'll come in and maybe borrow some of the time and throws, and workload by just going lighter from like 300, or we'll keep using the 180 model, 180 into, 120 feet, and then maybe from 120 in, we'll start to get after it a bit. Cause look, you're going there in the pen anyway and into the game. You're going to start getting after it anyway. So start day becomes a really important full long toss day. And again, you can, and if it's later in the season, maybe maybe instead of 300 feet, go out to 260. It may not be quite as far, but the point is that it is a very important full stretch out day with pretty normal pull downs, especially toward the end. And then on a 7-day, what would happen is that assuming someone's in great shape and assuming they were built up properly, well, that means their arm's in really good shape. That means they should have good endurance. They should recover well. So as a simple rule of thumb, we'll take the 180 model. And I'm trying to think. I need to do the 300-foot model because that's really something I deal with more. And then you can just use the percentages and reverse engineer. So on 300, so I'd say then the next day, the average player that's in really good shape is going to be anywhere from 120 to 200. Now we've had players over the years, one in particular, who pitched for quite a long time, and he liked to stretch it out the next day. And I've heard this from other players. They like to stretch it out the next day and really, flush it out, so to speak. Mm-hmm. As a rule of thumb, I would just say between 90 and 180 feet, somewhere in there is going to feel, we call that a low intent massage day, so only arc. Now day 2 is going to tend to be closer to a 200 to 300 foot day, also only arc, only what we call massage throwing. Now day 3 can either be the pen day, or in a perfect world, I would push it back to day 4 and use day 3 as sort of a similar day as day 2. Even though you're probably stronger in a way, but you're wanting to make sure that you optimize day 4. So day 3 would be maybe more like 200 to 300, maybe some light pull downs. The bottom line is you're setting up day 4 to where, and remember now, some people may want an extra pen during that week, and so it gets very complicated. But I'm doing this to where it's sort of day 1, your pen is on day 4, and your start date's back on day 7 again, or technically day 8. So start date, let's use the days of the week to make this easy. Sunday is your start date. right? So you go to 300 feet, stretch it out, you do some pull downs. Monday, 90 to 180 feet, only stretch it out. Tuesday, 200 to 300 feet, only stretch it out. Wednesday, the same. Thursday, full long toss, full pull downs, full pin. Friday, 120 to 200, light, only stretch it out. Saturday, day before your start, everybody's different. I'd say 90 to 180 feet, same idea, stretch it out. Sunday, start again.
Oh, so that's simple. That put it right into order for me. That works great.
Yeah, thank you. And the thing I like about this approach, and I've told this to people every time I've talked about this, our main focus is this. On my start day, what is the best way to set up my next start date? So everything with this program is based on optimizing what we call the recovery rebuild, or refresh rebuild. What is the best way to do that? And look, everybody's arm is different, so people can tweak this, but the idea is that you are recovering on Monday and Tuesday, and sort of Wednesday you're starting to build up. And you're setting up Thursday, so Thursday is a bingo day, but you're fresh, you're strong, and therefore you're going to recover really well on Friday because of that. And you're going to get a nice stretch out on Friday. Saturday, you're going to get another nice stretch out, maybe lighter. And so this whole idea is that the start day sets up the pen day, which sets up the start day. And if someone wanted to flip-flop, by the way, day 3 and day 4, because in a weird kind of way, I like the extra day for day 4, but there's another part of me that likes doing on day 3, because day 3, especially if an athlete only threw 40 to 60 pitches in the game, they are in beast mode on day 3. In other words, they're ready to fully stretch it out, they're ready to pull down well, and they're ready to get in a good pen. And then you borrow an extra day on the back end to set Sunday up, so you have another little more cushion to play with before your start. So that's why I'm saying day 3 and 4 are completely interchangeable. But anyway, that at least gives some people some options.
Yeah. What I like about it is that, every single day in that progression, there's throwing. Because I've heard people talk where they actually shut players down and don't throw it all in between starts on certain days. And I've never been a big proponent of that. I always felt that you should throw every day, again, not max effort, but you should throw every day just to keep your arm loose. But the other thing I wanted to ask you about, because again, this is something that there could be a lot of misconceptions about, is about running after you pitch. When do you run? How much do you run? All of that type of stuff.
Yeah, again, I would punt all that to the Eric Cressys and Randy Sullivans in the world. I can just tell you from my own experience and what I did and what felt right for me is, I'm just going to take the theory of after you work out, the idea of stretching right away, right? So it's part of your recovery. For me, it feels the exact same way. I feel like as soon as I'm done with the activity, so like let's say I threw my last pitch in the game, once you come out of a game, if you've thrown more than like say 30 to 45 pitches, I guess hitting still wouldn't be a big deal, but obviously I wouldn't want someone going back out and playing defense. But the moral of the story is this: as soon as you can, drink some water, start doing your band work, or we'll call it arm care. For us, I love all of the external rotation, reverse direction, band work right away. Like last pitch thrown, water. I'm going to do my post throwing arm care, which for us is bands. There's tons of other things out there that people do now, but for us, we'll stay in our lane with the bands. And as far as running, there's so much out there now on running. I mean, there's this whole idea of, only doing sprints and strides, right? And staying away from long distance. And so Nolan Ryan obviously always talked about the bike, which might be the best thing because there's, you're not putting any pressure on your knees and your lower back and all that. So what people do, again, I'll leave that to the experts that are in that field, but I can tell you from my experience, I love water too. I love being in the water. You hear things about, maybe you're not supposed to do forward strokes with, swimming. I can do internal, external stuff in the water, underneath the water, right? There's a lot of things I can do with the water, like bands. But the moral of the story is for me now, someone else may, an expert in the field may say I'm wrong. As far as I know, as soon as you're done, while the body is still in that activity mode, I want to get some water in my body, and I want to start oxygenating it and flushing it out, and start doing my bands, and then get to running or whatever activity of cardio you want to do. But get to your cardio. From my experience, get to it pretty quickly after you're done with your activity.
Okay, great. I wanted people to understand that because that's what I believe. Hydrate yourself, hydrate them constantly. So after they throw, then I want them to just go out into the outfield and do your running. So, and then we do different things during the week where they are running during the week also. Nothing crazy, mostly, just light jogs and stuff like that, just to further flush out if that works. But that's what we do.
Anything to flush out, and that's again where the bands are really helpful, because if you don't have access to other forms of arm care that that are out there now, for us, if nothing else, you get your bands out, you start doing some external rotation at hip height, shoulder height, you start doing some reverse throwing motion, the bottom line is you just start getting your bands going, and then you get into your flush with a run, and it's just magic, so yeah.
Yeah, well, that's something that the band work now will go into my, my post-pitch regiment moving forward, because that's something that I didn't push, but I will now.
Yeah, so you can just do anything all the external stuff, right? External rotation and hip, shoulder.
Yep.
This reverse throwing motion is huge, and everything you're doing going forward now, you're building back up, so to speak.
No, that's great advice.
Thank you.
Is there anything else that you want to bring up about arm care at all?
I would just say a couple things to put a bow on it. One is the number one principle of any throwing program out there is to listen to your arm. I know with the younger kids, maybe they won't be out there quite as long, but the whole idea is to eliminate the clock. There's no reason, as far as we're concerned, to put a limit on kids. Like, say you get 10 minutes to throw. Well, sometimes kids want to, even if it's super low intent at 50 feet, they're just playing catch, having fun. Well, those are, to me, some of the ways that maybe some of the best arms in the history of the game develop. Like, just because they're throwing. You said earlier, like, something about when I was younger, we could throw all day. And that's a scary concept for people to hear, but I know I had a rubber arm, and I think one of the reasons I had a rubber arm was I threw all the time. And I feel like you hear these stories about pitchers, and someone else would say, yeah, but the stories you don't hear. But I'm being very honest when I say this. It feels like it's, again, intuitive that we're talking about low impact throws. There's a reason BP pitchers make 300-400 throws a day, 6-7 days a week for 40 years and don't break down. And I understand they're not on the mound throwing breaking balls and all that, but the resilience in our arm, it's like the use it or lose it mentality. Randy Sullivan has a great line, the body's made to move. And I just feel like that's a very important thing for people, I hope that for them to hear, is to throw. Listen to your arm. Don't put constraints on kids. Let the snake, I have an analogy with a snake. You put a 5-foot snake in a 6-foot cage, it's not going to probably grow more than a foot. If you take the snake out of the cage, it still may only grow a foot, but it also may grow 30 feet.
Right.
So give the kids a chance to just be kids and play catch and have fun. And we don't have to even worry about terminology, just play catch. So that would be the second thing I'd say. A, listen to your arm. Remove these constraints when you can, but just remove the constraints. Let the kids be kids. The other thing that concerns me, quite honestly, is I know with the younger kids, there's maybe a couple of practices a week or in a game. I don't know the magic number, but I would just say this. Move the body, move the arm. It doesn't matter if you only go out to 60 feet, play catch 5-6 times a week, even 4. Just throw. I think that's the other really misunderstood and neglected part of throwing, is that we think with the young kids, and I don't mean 6 to 8 year olds, but there comes a point where I feel like it is important, if you're in season, play catch closer to 4 to 5 to 6 times a week, not 3. And that to me is a massive deal. And so I would say those are like my main things. Listen to your arm and just throw more often. It doesn't mean you have to go super far, pull down hard that day. Play catch and play more often, I think, than is probably going on out there with the young kids.
Yeah, you're bringing me back to my early days when I was a kid. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and in my backyard there was the neighbor's house. It was a big brick wall. And just going outside almost every day and throwing against that wall, of course I didn't know it at the time, but it taught you so many things. Forget it, obviously the arm care because you're throwing, but what it did for footwork and receiving the ball coming back to you off the wall, and there's just so much. So kids out there, find a wall. You don't need somebody to actually have a catch with. Just find a wall, throw the ball against the wall. There's so many things you can do.
Anything. Play catch, move the arm. Make up games, right?
Right.
And get out. And the other thing is, talking about mental health, get outside.
There you go.
Get out in space. Play catch.
Yeah. Like I say, Alan, all of that stuff is great stuff, and I'm glad that we have you here so our listeners can hear it. And I would love to stay on the throwing stuff all night, but we're going to have to move on. So let's get into a little bit about mental training, mental strength in baseball. Okay, the way I look at it is I call that like strength and conditioning for your mind. So instead of lifting weights, we need to do certain exercises, we need to do drills and all of the stuff that goes with it for the betterment of your mental performance.
Well, you said it. You said it perfectly. It's all about development of skills. So we think of physical development all the time because, you want to get better at the skill, you work at it, you practice. So the thing with the mental part of it is that it's more intangible. In other words, if I take 100 hacks today working on my swing to right center, chances are I'm going to probably see improvement, right? Or going in the hole on a ground ball, or throwing a new curveball in the bullpen, whatever it is I'm working on. When you practice something, one of my favorite lines from Dr. Shauna Shapiro is, you become what you practice. And so and I'm not blaming anybody for it. I think it's just one of those things that it's part of the educational process of our society. But we're getting to a point now where hopefully everybody's starting to realize that mental practice is vital. The mental game is 99.9%. It's, to me, 33 years in doing this, it's 99.9. So I'm 100% in agreement with you that it's the most important part by far. I think what I was saying is I always throw out a caveat that if you're playing a sport like baseball or volleyball or tennis, you still have to work hard on the physical aspects, of course. So it's tricky when you say it's 99.9. So what I always say is that the physical preparation is still also really important, but between the lines, so to speak, it's going to come down to now the 99.9. And for that reason, the mental preparation is by far more important. You just have to have the physical stuff in place just to be physically as good as you can be. And so back to really your first question or statement is this: if we're spending 40 hours a week on physical practice, right? Ground balls, fly balls, bullpens, running, stretching, lifting, that's where the big disconnect is. Because where is the mental practice coming in? If we're agreeing that eventually when you cross the line, it's going to be 99.99% mental, we could even say at the Little League level, it's still 80 to 90%. What are you doing to fill in that gap? What are you doing to ensure that that part of the game is being developed? And so I think it first starts with that awareness, right? Just to be aware that, oh, it is that mental. And then to have awareness that there is a way to train it and teach it is also huge. Because a lot of times we're like, okay, yeah, the mental game I know is important, but where do I start? And what does it really mean? Like, mentally tough, mentally strong, relaxed, focused, present, not distracted. So I think the first point is that just to bring this to people's awareness that, yes, it's not only 99.9% of the game eventually, but there is a way you can teach it and practice it so that you can develop mental skills the same way you would develop physical skills.
Yeah, I mean, I firmly believe that we have to, we have stations. I've talked about it many times in this show. I have a failure station in my practice. We do the meditation that I've sat in with you and Sheets on 2 Zoom calls already. And again, I want coaches out there to understand this too, is that I already meditate with my players. I've been doing it for years, and I still will sit in with you and Sheets 2 Zoom meetings, because if I can get a little bit more on how to teach my players better how to do that, then that's what it's about. But to your point, I'll use as an example, focus. You mentioned focus. So what I will do is and I'm just doing this just to give an example out there to coaches and parents to help their players. Player gets in the batter's box during batting practice. Well, he's required to put 1 foot in the box, 1 foot out, hold the bat, and I don't care if it's the barrel of the bat or whatever they do. Look at the barrel of the bat, focus on the barrel of the bat, deep breath in, deep breath out, now step into the box. So we drill it so that it becomes second nature. So I think that people need to understand that should be part of your practice, drilling the mental side of the game.
Yeah, and that would be like one great tool to do for the hitter. But I would look at it more, Jimmy, like macro versus micro. So micro would be a great tool for the hitter getting the box, or the player on defense, the movement, right? Or the pitcher when they get the ball back, right? What's their process, right? What's their practice mentally? But I would look at it more to start with the macro. The macro is that I want to have all the players before practice, let's say as you do, lie down. I want them all to practice skill development of relaxing, clearing their minds, getting quieter, getting more present, learning how to deal with distractive thoughts. So now I want them to go through this educational process and practice to where now they're developing their mind, their awareness, how to be clearer, quieter, calmer, more present, less distracted, adjust to situations faster because they're aware of their breathing, right? They're aware of their process. They're aware of looking at the barrel of the bat and what does that really mean? So I would say for those listening that the idea is you want to have all your kids at the start of practice take 5 or 10 minutes minimum and teach them how to breathe, how to slow down, how to get quiet. What does it mean to deal with distracting thoughts? Like, that is a skill. So yes, I would say there's sort of that macro approach of general health and mental health and well-being. And then there's very specific pieces throughout the game that you can also utilize as tools.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, and again, like I had said, the Zoom call that I was on, the last one, that part about what you just mentioned about how to handle distracting thoughts, I wasn't aware of it, but I picked it up on the last one, and now this year, when I get my players, it's going to be that much better.
I think what would be really good to talk about also is how do you deal with distracting thoughts? And the term that Sheets and I, that we really hammered that night, is being neutral.
Yes.
And so I'd say for the listeners to take one tool away from this podcast for mental health and well-being, on or off the field, is this concept of being neutral, meaning if thoughts come up, and generally thoughts are going to be about the past or future, right? They're They can be very distracting potentially. How do we stay present? How do we stay in where we're at now, where our feet are, so to speak? And neutral is this great concept where you realize that I don't have to have a conversation with my thoughts, right? That's what's keeping the thoughts going, which then could be creating the worrying or the stress or the anxiety. How do I stop? Oh, well, if I'm neutral, that means thoughts are talking to me, but I'm neutral, so I'm not talking back to them. You know, a few analogies I love. One is the thoughts are like asking you to take a dance, and you're saying no. Another one I love is you're the umpire of a tennis match. You're up on the chair. Thought comes in, that's one of the players hitting the ball. And then maybe another thought wants to respond to that. That's the other player hitting the ball. And you're just watching. You're watching the thoughts, and you're not feeding them. And you're giving them a chance to dissolve and quiet. That's from being neutral. That alone, that tool alone, could completely change someone's life instantaneously, because until you're aware that these thoughts are coming in and then I'm responding to thoughts and I'm getting on this merry-go-round with them, which then creates potentially a lot of stuff.
Right.
A lot of drama, a lot of potential stress, anxiety, worry, fear, tension, that you're now not feeding that and you're going back into neutrality. Now, neutrality is a word I used earlier, space. Space to me is like freedom. Space to me is like being present again, because you didn't leave the present to go into the conversation with the thought. So neutral is a great practice when the kids are laying down and you're teaching them how to breathe. I mean, you can just give this to someone as a tool for life, whether you're meditating with them or not.
Right.
But it's a great way to practice being neutral when you can stop to watch your mind and thoughts, as opposed to being in the course of your day or at practice or in a game. And it's hard on the fly to stop and look at the thought. I mean, eventually that ideally is something that you do quickly because you've practiced it. But the idea of being neutral intentionally in a practice where you're not distracted by things and you can watch what's going on is, to me, one of the greatest exercises you can do for your mental health.
So another thing, a lot of the stuff that we do with mental performance, and again, I want to get your opinion on this. Do you feel that a lot of the stuff is personal, meaning that some of the skills work better on player A than they do on player B? So are there ways to give options for players to try and figure out which way works for them, or is it just one standard way to do it?
Yeah, I would say, as you know, like everything in life, you give as many options as you can. Where someone wants to breathe, someone else wants to count, someone else wants to lay on the beach, someone else might want to visualize. I think there's some universal things that generally seem to be super helpful no matter what, like breathing, like being neutral, practicing being neutral, being in the process as opposed to the results or the consequences. So I do think there's a lot of universal themes that are very powerful and very consistent. But yeah, if someone said, hey, I kind of liked that, but I didn't resonate as much as doing this, I'd say, hey, do that. But yes, you definitely want to give options. I've done exercises with everything from counting your breathing to watching your breathing to letting your breathing breathe you to laying on a raft, floating, flowing, laying on the beach. I've done a lot of stuff over the years with visualization. So it's like what do you call it? It's like a toolbox, right? You have these different formats that you can pull from and say, today I'm going to just meditate on my breath. Today I'm going to just do some visualization. Today I'm going to do a little bit of both. But like a lot of things in life, continuity is important. So a lot of times having a base of knowing I generally meditate this way, but the bottom line is whatever works. Diversifying is a great idea because you get you can get this. It's back to the long toss, right? The variability.
Yeah.
But it's a good question, Jimmy, and the fact that you don't want to just be so narrow that you don't appeal to everyone, and you want to make sure people know that there are many different ways to meditate.
Right. So you really don't want to cookie cutter it, so to speak. There are certain things that you have to do. Yes, and I agree. Breathing is huge. When to box breathe, when to focus breathe. We go through that. And with my high school team, it's easier because I'm with them every day. With my travel boys, it's a little harder. I kind of have to pick and choose which things, because I don't see them that often. I see them a couple times a week, and then, maybe on the weekend for some games. So, yeah, I mean, there are staples that have to be done.
Yeah, it's like anything in life. You start getting a feel for that group of kids, what works for them and what they like. And I'm a huge feedback guy. I'm always asking people about everything, about just give me feedback, because feedback is powerful. You start really understanding what's working or what may not be working as well. And everybody wants to be heard. So give the kids a voice, and you get to go to school on it, of course.
Right. So, Alan, I could talk baseball all day, all night. I could keep going with you. This has been a great conversation, and I don't want it to end, but all good things must come to an end. So I really appreciate you coming on. What I'd like you to do, if you don't mind, is give everybody your contact information. Where can they reach you? Where can they find out more about you?
Yeah, for sure. And by the way, all good things don't have to come to an end, right? Just all good things just keep going. Oh. I'm an optimist.
Okay, I'll buy into that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to tell you how to think, but just while I got you here, I've heard that line a million times before, and I always wonder, like, why do all good things I mean, good things can just be good.
No, you're 100% right, and I love it.
As far as contact, the easiest thing is jaegersports.com is our website. We've got tons of free articles and videos, and Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. We're at Jaeger Sports. That's pretty much it. So they'll find us there. But I would recommend and also YouTube, we've got videos there, but we've got a lot of free stuff. If you go to our website, go to like our media page, maybe lots of podcasts like this. So easiest way to find us. Yeah. That's
great. Well, like I said, I can't thank you enough. This has been fantastic.
Thank you for what you're doing for the community. Thank you for having me on. It's been a treat to hang out with you and talk about baseball and the mental game and mental health. So I appreciate you having me on. So thank you.
Anytime, Alan. I'd have you back anytime you want to come back and talk. And again, enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, bud. You too.
Well, I can always tell when we have a guest that you're really, really interested in, because I just can't ever get a word in edgewise.
Well, you know what, Dave? It just shows what we talked about in the beginning of the show, that, it's very difficult to get our schedules together. So this was one of those shows where I had to run, solo. And, I mean, look, I missed you. I always feel, I always feel like, when you're not there, it's like I'm doing it like with one hand tied behind my back. And with a guest like Alan, I really needed your help, but I think I got through it.
I think it went great. I mean, he's a pro. He's a pro at what he does, and he's certainly is used to. He seemed very comfortable being on the mic. So I think it was a great talk that you guys had. You guys went in a bunch of different directions. Anything you want to highlight for our people?
Yeah, Dave, there's a number of things that we talked about that I'd like to highlight. And the one thing is that how versatile Alan is. I mean, between his throwing programs and his mental side, and, the stuff that he does with the Jaeger bands, there's just so much to the man that, everyone could probably tell why I was so excited to get him on the show. And the other thing, too, is I've said this many times with many guests we've had, just from talking to Alan for a very short period of time, I feel like I've known the man my whole life. He's that easy to talk to.
Well, yeah, and it comes across as you guys are having your conversation, it certainly comes across that there seems to be an affection there that, is reciprocated back and forth. He's got a very, very successful business. He's been doing it a long time. And it's not like he came on and just tried to sell. On other podcasts that I listen to, you hear some of the guests come on and all they do is want to get their name of their book out or the name of their website out or whatever, because that's their whole reason for coming on and doing it. And what we see over and over again in the baseball world, and certainly Alan was, a shining star of this, is just somebody that loves baseball, has a lot to offer, and has no qualms about giving it out for free for people to listen to.
Exactly. And, like I said before, just what a great guy. I mean, anybody that's out there, go to Jaeger Sports, look him up. There is so much stuff that you can use. I mean, I could tell you that even though we had like an hour-long conversation, there's still so much more that people can learn from Alan that they should look into. We only scratched the surface.
Well, yeah, there's only so much. A guy that's been doing it for, I don't even know, a couple of decades, and you have an hour-long conversation. So obviously, if you're not speed reading through everything, you're going to be in a situation where you can only touch on a few topics, and then you move on. And like we wind up doing with a lot of our guests, just saying, you know what, we'd love to have you back some point. Hopefully he was willing to spend some time. It sounded like he enjoyed the conversation as much as you did, maybe a little less, but almost as much as you did. And, I'm sure he'll be willing to share some more of his insight and knowledge with our people down the line.
Right. Yeah. I mean, he's another one of our guests that we've had, like several others, that I was like a kid in a candy store. I mean,
right.
To meet these guys and to talk to them and like you said, the fact that they're willing to come on and share all of this information for our listeners to help make them better, it's amazing. It's really a good feeling.
Yeah, and it's all, like I said, it's all part of this baseball community that I'm very proud to be part of. And I always say, hopefully our listeners got something out of it. They had to have. So I don't even need to say hopefully. I'm sure you guys got a lot out of that. I know I did. I know that Jimmy did, and we're very, very happy to be able to continue to bring shows like that to you. So we want you to, support the people that come on here. So go to Jaeger Sports. That's JAEGER sports.com. Check him out on the socials. He's out there. He's got a ton of good information out there. And, support the people that we have on the show, because we want to keep bringing you great shows like this. While you're doing that, you want to go out and rate the show on your Apple Podcast, your Spotify, what have you. Give us 5 stars. Write us a comment. Give us a review. Be gentle. We want to keep bringing you stuff. Reach out to us on the socials as well. We're both on Facebook. We're on Twitter. You also have at the CTB show on Twitter. There you can get to both of us at once without going into the individuals. You can email us at clearingthebases@gmail.com. Let us know what you thought. You have any ideas for future shows, go ahead and jump on there and let us know. We love to hear back from our people. The show has been going up the charts. It's great. We love doing it. And like I said, while we may come to you a little less often over the next month and a half, 2 months or so, we're still going to look to bring you as good quality show as we possibly can. So please, as I remind the kids that I coach all the time, and I remind you guys, remember, there's the 2 things in life that we can control at all times. We want 100% effort and a positive mental attitude, PMA. Great things will follow. Final thoughts, Coach?
Yeah, like Dave said, I encourage everybody to go out there and look up Jaeger Sports. Follow Alan. There's just so much there. I've said it a million times. There's just so much there that you can learn from this man. And I think that it's in your best interest to take advantage of what he's offering. And, he's one of the guys that I've been following for a very, very long time. He's taught me so much about this game, whether it be, again, like I said, in his long toss program, the things that we spoke about during the show, long toss program, his band work stuff, and most importantly, recently, a lot of the mental side of the game that he's taught me. And I can assure you that Alan is somebody who really understands. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you on the next one.